This is my second lecture on the poem Elegy written in a country churchyard. In my first lecture, we talked about what an elegy is and what were the motives of the poet while writing this poem, and what are the general topics which are usually covered under the style of writing poetry, which is an elegy. Now, in this poem, we would be covering every line of the poem, and I would try to discuss every line with you and explain every line of the poem to you. The poem begins with the line, "The curfew tolls the knoll of parting day." Now, as I had discussed in my first lecture, that this poem is written in the background of country churchyard. Country churchyard is a place where a church is situated, and usually in the premises of church there is a graveyard, and the word country means the countryside, the rustic, the rural side of any place, any country. The curfew tolls the knell of parting day. The curfew tolls curfew tolls is the church bell. The church bell is ringing and it is giving you the knell of parting day. It is telling you that it is the end of a day. The day is parting. It is the time of evening. The lowing herd wind slowly over the lea. The lowing herd, this is the sound of the herds which are winding slowly, which are coming back home while grazing all day over the lea, over the pastures. The ploughman homeward plods his weary way, and the ploughman, the farmer, homeward plods, he is coming back home his weary way, and this, he is tired, he is weary, and he is coming tired because he has put in all day's labor, and the way is weary. In fact, it is an example of transferred epithet. It is the ploughman who is tired, not the way. So this epithet, this adjective has been transferred to way. The way is looking weary, but it is being travelled by the ploughman, and the ploughman himself is tired, and this epithet has been transferred to way, which appears weary. And leaves the world to darkness and to me. And this is the atmosphere. This is how it is in evening. It is an evening of a village, a countryside, countryside of a European country, and the day is parting. One could hear the church bells. One could hear the sounds of herd who are coming back, grazing all day in pastures, and then there is a ploughman, the farmer, who is coming back home. He is all tired, and the way looks weary to him, and leaves the world to darkness and to me. And since it is the time of evening, darkness is approaching, night is approaching, the world looks dark, and the poet also feel a bit sad and pensive at this point of time. Now fades the glimmering landscape on the sight. The landscape which is visible, which is since it is countryside, and one could see the landscape in one glimpse. That now that the landscape which had been glimmering, which had been shining throughout the day, now it is fading. One could not see the landscape as clearly because very naturally the night is falling, and this is the time when one could not see very clearly the landscape. All the air is solemn, stillness hold, and the air means the atmosphere, is still, solemn. It is very silent, and it is very peaceful, and it is very dignified. And this stillness, this peacefulness is being held in the atmosphere. Save where? Save here means except where the beetle wheels the droning flight. Everything is silent except, save means except where the beetle is an insect, wheels his droning flight. He has a drone and he's taking small flights, and it is the sound of beetle which is visible, which is being heard. Otherwise everything is dark and everything is silent. And drowsy tinkling lull the distant folds, and drowsy tinkling, the bells which are there around the necks of the herds, One could hear the tinkling sounds of the forts in which these herds are kept. Lull the distant forts. They are creating a sound of lull, as if they are creating a sound which makes people sleep, or which gives a very peaceful sound in between a very in an atmosphere which is otherwise also very silent, very still, very solemn. Save that from yonder ivy mantled tower, the moping owl does to the moon complain. Now there is another animal which is making sound, and that is owl. And owl is living in a tower which is all isolated, and which has ivy grown all over it, and ivy has created a mantle, a cover over the tower. The moping owl does to the moon complain. Now owl is living in this tower, and it is complaining to the moon, because owl is usually heard or seen during nights. Of such a wandering near her secret bower, molest her ancient solitary reign. Now owl is afraid, or owl is conscious of someone who could invade her secret bower, secret place where it is living, molest her ancient solitary reign. And since the owl is living in a solitary, isolated regime, she does not want that anybody should invade that place and molest her. Beneath those rugged elms that yew tree shade, where heavens the turf in many a mouldering heap. Beneath those, now there are elm trees which are rough, that yew trees shade where heaves the turf is grass in many mouldering heap. The turf is there in heaps, mouldering heaps, one by one upon another. Each in his narrow cell forever led, the rude forefathers of the hamlet sleep. Now beneath these trees, elm trees, there are cells, there are graves of villagers who are being led in their narrow cells, in their narrow small graves, because they are very common people and they do not have very big graves. The rude forefathers, the rustic forefathers of the hamlet village sleep, are resting for their after their death in these graves, and these graves are narrow, they are very small graves, they do not have big graves, and the turf or the grass is grown over their graves, and there are mouldering heaps, there are mouldering heaps over one over other heap which are there on their graves. The rude forefathers, these people who are being led there, they're rude, they are uneducated, they're rustic, they are not so much refined, as they belong to a village and they're very common people. Hamlet sleep, hamlet is village, hamlet means village. The breezy cell of incense breathing morn. Now the breezy call of incense breathing morn, breezy call, during the morning there is incense being burnt at every household, and there is one could breathe its incense in morning. The swallow twittering from the straw built shed. Now the swallow, the birds being heard during morning, which are there on straw built, on these huts are built by straws. The cock shrill. Now these are the common sounds which are there in morning. The cock shrills clarion, or the echoing horn. Now these are the sounds. One could hear the shrill of the cock, one could hear the twitching of swallows, and one could have the incense in the morning, because these are very simple sounds of morning which one could hear, and one could see that the methods of worship are also very simple during in the villages. So one could smell that incense, and one could hear the sounds of swallows and cocks during morning of a very simple village, and which is being inhabited by very simple village people. We would cover the rest of the poem in the next lecture.